Hi guys, welcome back to Evolve. So we're doing a continuous of part A because epilepsy and mental health is just so broad and you don't want to leave out any other part. So in this episode, we'll be talking about the impact epilepsy has on sexuality and also on mental health. So Ramsey, thank you again for having this conversation with me.
Karibu sana. Before I start the conversation, Mama, your child is very innocent. So in case you hear some things, let's persevere, but I'm very innocent.
Okay. So how does epilepsy affect a person's sexuality?
You see, sex as it is, as a conversation peke yake, it's complicated. Now, when you add epilepsy, it adds another element to it. It's even more complicated because there are many factors. For example, the medication, especially in men, I'll speak as a man. You find that it has been proven, it's research imefanywa, that the anti-epileptic drugs ziko na ability za kulower or heighten your libido. Depending, it's just the same way medication venye. You find medication iko na different side effects. So you find that in some cases, like your libido, your desire to have sex is non-existent. Or sometimes it's just way up on the roof. And what is interesting is, for example, in my case, if I may give, is that not once, not twice or thrice, where a lady has tried to make sexual advances on me and I've turned her down and I'm being called gay. And if I may drift a little bit, you see, we've been so active on creating awareness about consent, especially as far as women are concerned. And there has been progress. Not enough, but yeah, there has been progress. But when it comes to men, there's not much spoken about consent in sex. So you find that as a man, you tell a woman no, and she's pushing herself on you. And you are limited because you cannot do much to her, because kidogo it's very easy kuje ni wewe ulikuwa unajaribu kumpiga. So luckily I've not found myself in a situation where I have to be violent, but I've been accused of being a gay because I mean, yes, she's a beautiful woman. And I don't know why label. Yes, I don't know why sometimes women can be shocked when a guy turns them down. Or maybe it's because we've created this thing that men will sleep with anything that comes on their way. So you find that most people dealing with epilepsy, and I'm very sure it's just that the conversation is not much spoken about, is they struggle a lot when it comes to consent. Like, let's create here a hypothetical situation. Here's a girl living with epilepsy, and then she's walking somewhere, let's say around town or somewhere in the dark and everything. And then she gets an attack. And what happens during these attacks that most people don't even know is that, like, yes, this person doesn't have an idea, first of all. Sometimes people just are completely knocked out. They don't even know where they are, what has happened. You get? So she gets raped and she doesn't even know, because these people will flee. And then this girl is raped and then she goes home and she'll be like, I just got an attack.
Forgive me for this question. And now what happened in such a case? And can a person who is epileptic carry a pregnancy to full term?
First of all, if I may correct, they don't like it when we are called epileptics, because it's like a baptism of fire. It's like that is an identity that we identify. And
I'm so sorry for that.
It's okay. It's okay.
Living with epilepsy.
Yes. So like we live to learn each day. It's because when you say epileptic, basically it means you're just seeing the condition. But when you say person living with epilepsy, you're separating the two. So yes, actually, yes, you can carry your pregnancy and you can give birth to a very healthy child, just because there are some few cases. Of course, there are some few cases where you find that might be deformity and everything, but there are factors playing to that. You see, it's not necessarily about epilepsy. Take, for example, in women. In women, I normally say they experience the toughest periods of epilepsy because during the menstrual cycle, you find that because of the hormonal changes, they're most likely to get frequent attacks more than normal. So in some cases, even the doctor prescribes medication on top of the medication that they use to control seizures so that they can strengthen. So you see, because of the medications that we take, they can result into different side effects. So it's difficult just to say, because it's epilepsy, that's why ABCD it happened. Yes, there are few cases. Just the same way we say there are some few disabilities that when a child has, they can be affiliated with epilepsy very easily. Like a child with cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, most likely you'll find that it's very easy for them to see them getting an attack, having epilepsy rather.
Yeah. Does it create a fear of having children, like epilepsy when you're epileptic?
Oh yeah, and if I may use like myself, the thing that personally I've been fighting for all my life, and it's something by the way I've never told anyone, even my mom, despite the fact that I tell her a lot of things. Like I probably relate, like I said, I think even in the previous episode, is that every parent needs to feels like they want to give birth to a healthy baby. Actually, a parent will happily sacrifice themselves for their children. So for me, with all I've gone through rather as a result of having epilepsy, the thought of having my child to go through that, it's scary. You see, so I'm not going to sit here and lie to you that it doesn't scare me. It does, but I have desire to one day start a family of my own. So it takes a lot of mental strength and be like, and of course I'm a prayerful individual. So like, I'm like, God, this is your work, takusaidia kufanya job yako. So I feel like my spiritual element imenisaidia sana because, yeah.
And is it hard to marry?
Yes, it is hard. Actually, it is because, again, I go back to the point whereby the general conversation of marriage, even for people that don't have any form of disability, is hard. So finding someone that is going to accept you for your shortcomings, because like we were having a conversation with a friend of mine, I was just trying to understand the female perspective. Nowadays, even courtship has become like a contract negotiation. You see? So like in that contract, you find that I'm a liability to some. Someone like a woman that I was dating, and she was like, I remember I was not even planning that day we meet, and then she was like, can we meet today? She used to like somewhere up Aga Khan Road. Is it Aga Khan Way or something? Aga Khan Walk, yeah. Aga Khan Walk, where there used to be these bands where guys will come and rehearse, and she used to love that. So one day she's like, let's meet Apple. And listen to that. And when I was there, unfortunately, I did not anticipate that it will be that late because, of course, tuna meet around saa tisa. So I was like, by 4, 5 at most, ndakuwa tumetoka. One of my major triggers is cold. Naona baridi. So like while I was there, tulikaa mpaka 7. And then baridi kani trigger. And not necessarily conversing. What I told you, my clonic jacks. Hiyo kutetemeka. And she was like, don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. And in my unconsciously, I'm speaking to myself. I'm like, do you think I'm doing this on purpose? But that was not the difficult part. Then she went, of course, being a gentleman, nini, you know, those early stages whereby nikampeleka, despite the fact that I'm literally jerking, and I could use help, mtu anishike. So nikampeleka, mpaka hapo railways, akaingia gari akaishia. Now, you remember back then when, I don't know what was happening with the phones, unatumiwa text so long inakuja in 2 pieces. So I read, it's a thing I'm very sure, it's a thing most women do. Oh, you're an amazing guy, you're this, but you always know that sentence is going somewhere with a but. And then she gave me this lecture about the way she wants one day to have a family with a father that can teach their children to swim, a father that can ABCD, someone who will not transfer whatever it is they're battling to the children. You see? So it was challenging, and even that brings me to the conversation of the way epilepsy has ability of limiting you to social life.
Yeah.
For example, I cannot dare to drive. And not just to drive. I don't want even to go to driving school because the temptation of being behind the wheel, I don't want. I'll rather be like, sijui could drive. Number 2, I cannot swim. The motion ya maji triggers me. You see? Number 3, like matatus. Lately, it's a no goes on for me. So your expensive life, or the idea of people having fun, so you'll feel left out. Imagine, like right now, before it was stigma that used to make you feel left out. But right now, you find yourself in it's the circumstances, not people telling you don't do this. The circumstance, the environment. So you are restricted to a certain behavior, to a certain way of living your life, certain discipline that some you don't like.
Yeah.
You see?
We're in Kenya, and like I almost fell victim one day to a person who was pretending to be having an attack. So in a country like Kenya, where everybody wants to take advantage of everybody, now you're having an attack, and it's a real attack. How do you seek help? Is it a challenge getting help from people? Because also there are con men who pretend that they're having an attack sometimes. Do you have like bands that identify you so that now when a person can find you, like maybe if you're having an attack, they can maybe call the number, or they can maybe say you're not faking and it's there?
So actually, that's a nice... Personally, I don't, because during the day, rarely I'll get attacks. But it's encouraged whereby there are those tags. There is number of someone to call, the next of kin or whoever. And there's also steps whereby in case of these attacks, whoever stranger is, what to follow so that they know what to do with you. I'll give you an example with my friend. My friend is in the business of kutengeneza soaps and everything, living with epilepsy. So one day, he's kwa Manyanja Road. And then he gets an attack, inamtupa kwa mtaro. You see? And akiamka, like they're good people. Akaamka, kapata, watu walipigia brother yake simu, and then akapelekwa hosi hapo. Now you see, those are good people. Yes. Now let's flip that again. The same person, different experience. One day, ameamka, ameenda kununua breakfast. And I'm telling you this because he doesn't mind me sharing that. Ameamka kwenda, I normally laugh at him because he can laugh at me. Ameamka, ameenda kununua breakfast. And then akapata attack. Baada ya kuregain consciousness, alipata hizo vitu, breakfast imeibiwa, lakini ameachiwa simu. Also, that gets to tell you the mindset of the environment, where someone just saw the food. But the fact is that these attacks, depending na inakupata wapi, they can just be prepared. You see, that is why I encourage everywhere you go, make sure there's someone who knows where you are. Number 2, if it's possible, go with someone.
Talking about that, do you have a community where you're able to assist each other, and where when you go, you feel like you belong and you can share the challenges on sexuality, on the attacks, etc.?
Yes. So like, I thank God because lately I've not been there, but it's still a family. It's called Youth on the Move. Youth on the Move, basically, you find that its foundation, the founder was a Dutch woman called Karin Ausems, where she used to be living with epilepsy, and then I'll say luckily for her, it was one of those where they could be operated, and so she came to Kenya and then started the organization. So what normally happens during when you're Youth on the Move, there are young people, different people living with epilepsy, not necessarily young, but just different people living in different conditions, but the foundation is epilepsy. So what happens is that, for example, every Saturday, they normally have this we call Sikika meetings, whereby they can be debating about different topics, and then they end up with how does this affect people living with epilepsy? Or sometimes we just sit down and just talk strictly about epilepsy personal experiences, so that you learn how did you handle. I can borrow a trick or two, the way I maneuver around this and this and this. So for me, like, my trick is always very simple. Immediately I'm in a new environment, I make sure there's at least one person that knows about first aid of epilepsy, so that in case something happens to me, they'll not. And I tell them, do not be afraid to be afraid. You see, allow yourself to be afraid. That's the only way you'll calm down.
Forgive me for this question, but can two people is it advisable for two people living with epilepsy to marry, or does it have like a consequence?
This goes down to personal opinion, and I'll not currently, or at least maybe the reason why I'm saying currently, because opinions do change. Personally, I'll not advise that. You see, or I'll not do, let me say that. I'll not do that because, in my humble opinion, I like that not only does it increase chances of maybe having a child living with epilepsy, but even that, I think it's far-fetched yet. Just like a question that I normally ask my friend and we joke. So sisi wote tukipata attack, nani atasaidia mwingine? Because one thing is easy to forget is that if you had an attack right now, I can easily be triggered by that. You see, like, there are others who are triggered just by the sight of the fact that there's someone else who's having an attack. Some say because it feels like I'm next. You see? So, or others is because emotionally they're overwhelmed. For example, me, I cannot be overexcited. I cannot be too sad. I always need to keep my emotions in check. So, again, and I know someone, how do I put this? I know it will sound strange, but slowly by slowly, there's this victimhood. It's like you become a victim of circumstances. And the thing about, and it's something that I tell people living with epilepsy, I'm in a position to speak about the topic because you can relate with it. It's funny because I asked one question because I like creating controversy. Why is it that if I said something about you concerning epilepsy, something that you're uncomfortable, you're not going to react? But when someone else who doesn't have epilepsy just ask the same question, you're like, that is stigma. You see? Now, that right there is the very definition of victim mentality. That is one telltale sign that you are stuck into this victim mentality. And the dangerous thing about victim mentality is that it gives birth to this sense of entitlement. Victim mentality and entitlement is a marriage made in hell. So, like, you start going around feeling like
the world owes you something.
There you go. You cannot differentiate between, if I get an attack right now, it is not your responsibility. You get? It's not your responsibility to take care of me. I know, is it fair? No, it's not. But if you are to help me, it's because you are willing. It's a choice, not because you are demanded or required. But when you're stuck in this victim mentality, you feel like you're odd. If I get an attack.
Let's go back to the situation where this girl falls on the street, the scenario you gave, and she's raped, or where a woman is trying to seduce you.
Yes.
Are there structures that are put in place to protect people living with disability or maybe a mental condition against such assault?
I'll say this, and before I start, if there's any form of ignorance, may people pardon me. You get? But I genuinely think that women have more of these spaces where they can go, because women, and it's very sad that they've been a bigger percentage of victim of rape, they are women. And I can tell you at least 5 centers that I know, if you're a rape victim, you can go as a woman and you'll get help. You get, because you find that, and I wish men we did that, find that there are structures whereby women, they are solely for women to fight, be it patriarchy, be it what. But now, when it comes to a man, I can tell you this, be it your friends, I can guarantee your friend, your male friend can be raped and they'll not come and tell you anything.
Yeah.
Because can you imagine, like, even telling a story and you go and tell a judge, I was raped by a woman. Like,
how do you get raped by a woman? That's what they would
exactly.
ask. Yeah.
You see,
because you have to voluntarily.
Bas.
Yeah.
Nona.
Yeah.
But there are people, they are male, there are men who get raped by women. So you find that there are no much structure for men that are set, so that safe spaces where you can go and say, man, even amongst ourselves, not even talking just about women. Like,
something can probably create.
Yes, your fellow men will make fun of you. So it starts even from there, because I find that females are very accommodative of each other. Like, they are there to offer support and everything. And there's this unity, there's this movement of modern women that has come together, and they're like a family.
Yeah.
But we don't have, when was the last time you saw such setup that advocates, that male figure that advocate for men? Unakuja unapata a whole man anaenda kwa wall ya feminist who is advocating for women, and then anauliza hapo chini, what about the men?
Yeah.
You see, do you see that conflict? That is how there are no structures for men, and it's a challenge even for us as men to come up with these safe places, not necessarily even just for people living with epilepsy, generally, because men go through a lot, be it for mental health, be it rape and everything, and all these are tied, mental health.
Yeah.
So,
let me ask you another question. It's a bit sensitive, but can an attack be, like, get you when you're doing the sexual act, or can sex sometimes trigger?
yes.
And yes?
Yes. You don't even need to finish that. Again, there are different forms of trigger. There are different forms of trigger. Just because I'm triggered by this, it does not necessarily, it will be a trigger. For example, my case is photosensitivity epilepsy. That's number one. Flashlights and all that, strobes. For someone else, it can be something different. You get? So when it comes to the conversation of sex, there are others. I have a friend who she confided in me that she's scared of having sex, and this affects her relationships. Why? Because when whenever she engages in this activity, she gets triggered and she gets conversions. And this person might think that you're about to die in my hand. So you find that exactly. And at that particular time, you're not able to talk, because let's say you're having the grand mal seizures whereby you're even unconscious. And you need to remember, this is how you lack control, how much you lack control when you're having grand mal seizures, when you're conversing. There are others who don't have even bowel control. You can wake up and you find yourself, you've peed on yourself. That is how bad they are. You cannot even control the most primitive acts. So imagine this sexual activity going on, and here is someone you're conversing, and here's someone thinking that they're giving you your sexual experience of your life. You get?
Yeah.
So
Imagine.
there are those forms, and these again, that friend of mine, Lillian, she wrote something, and which triggers something in me just to think about. It's about conversation about sex, whereby you gave consent to having sex, but after the experience, you feel violated. You see? So that is a perfect scenario. Both parties gave consent. You see? But this one had an attack, but after that experience, and because this other guy did not know, you get, let's even pretend like this other guy has performance issues sexually. So when this moment arrives, because men have ego, you see, that is why most men after sex, they'll ask you, that conversation kuliendaje, they want to know. They want to know if you've achieved orgasm. So it's down to ego. So assuming this guy has low self-esteem sexually, and then they see a girl conversing during the sex experience, and the ego goes up because he thinks I'm giving this woman the sex of her life. Not knowing, and it's not that he is ignorant, not that he's trying to rape or anything. It's just because he has no clue.
Yeah.
And when this girl wakes up, she'll feel violated. Because fortunately or unfortunately, depending where you are, because most people don't know this, during sexual experiences, even if someone had given consent before, once they say no, even in the middle of it, you need to back off. Yes. If you're engaging in sexual experience, yes, you had given me consent, and then in the middle of activity, you're like, no, that I should back off. If I keep going, that qualifies rape.
Yeah.
Because that's how consent functions. You're allowed to change your mind.
And now, how do you juggle all these things? How do you juggle epilepsy? Epilepsy can very easily trigger mental illness.
Yes.
And then now you juggle it together with sexuality. How do you manage all this?
Personally, like, first of all, don't overthink issues.
Yeah.
Because the more you think about this, the more it's just handle one thing at a time. Because if you're going to have sex and all you think is the way you'll get an attack, you're manifesting basically. You see? And like, I think for me it's difficult to talk about it because it has never happened to me. So I'm not in a position to talk about it because I'll be talking it out of ignorance, if I may say. But I like to think like, let's remove sex in the topic, the way you handle everything, these activities happening at the same time, or you find yourself in circumstances where you have to be there and there are just a lot of things going on, is you need to learn to separate. Like, just in something men we are good at, whereby we can just zone out. You think we are not listening to you, Nini, but I'm somewhere in the wheat field. You see? So you need to know your poison, what makes you at peace. Listen, personally, it's music, orchestra. So for me and jazz, or those old school, like I always say, I normally feel like I was born during the wrong generation. So like for me, that calms me down. Or irony or creepy part of it is that I go and sit somewhere in the dark and just listen to the music, then calm my nerves down, and then I calm. You just sigh, then I calm. For me, it's something actually I discovered recently as a result of going to therapy and just sighing. The other day I was about to get attacked and I just sighed. Breathe in, breathe out. And then the attack disappeared. So sometimes it's not even the fact. These attacks comes because of our anxieties.
Wow. I really love your story because it's just a combination of strength and going to where you fear the most. Like, for instance, you have an epilepsy, which is triggered by light.
Yes.
And you're in the career where you have to use light all the time.
Yes.
So that is a beautiful ashes kind of story. And thank you so much for sharing it. Is there something maybe that you'd like to add to the conversation that maybe we've not been able to touch on?
In conclusion, because you've brought up that thing, lights for I don't like advising people to follow what I do in terms of people living with epilepsy, following your passion, in terms of this is your trigger. Because for me, I've learned the way to maneuver around it. You can, you see, people are different, but do not go and do it and say, I saw Ramsey do it, so I'm going to do it. Lucky enough, the old doctor of mine, we used to be very good friends. I'm saying used to because right now I have new doctors. And he used to tell me, we used to joke and tell me, you're the most naive patient I've ever had to deal with. This is now outside the confine of medical, whatever. This is just as friend. Namuuliza kwa nini? I'm like, he's like, you go where I tell you where the danger is. It's like danger excites you. And for me, you could not tell the difference between, because sometimes these attacks come and they're accompanied by manic episode. It's like I go rogue. So like the recent that I had, not the recent, the second recent that I had, wait for the neighbor, not for neighbors. Nilikuwa nimepanda balcony and I live 5th floor or 6th. So like, I don't remember doing that, but they told me that was what was happening. You see? And in conclusion, and this is a plead, wacha tu plead leo kwa serikali venye wana plead. In Kenya, we have only two epileptologists, and I know them because there is this National Epilepsy Coordination Committee where we meet and all that, create events and all that about epilepsy. 2, I know them because the only one. Can you imagine if Kenya had only 2 oncologists? You see? Number 2, in Kenya, we have an average of 50 neurologists. 52. So you find that in terms of structure, there are not many people that specialize in dealing with this epilepsy. And as a result, you see the number may increase. That's why unaenda huko, then you go to those rural areas, poor structures in terms of hospitals and everything. And these play a role in accidents and everything, a major role in giving birth to children with epilepsy because the baby was not well taken care of, those stages of, pregnancy. So these are all factors that play a major role whether or not this baby will be born with epilepsy or not. So unfortunately, that's where we are. And Youth on the Move has been so active we normally gather these signatures so that the government can subsidize the cost of medication for people living with epilepsy because the medication are crazily expensive. For example, the medication that I use, 1 tablet is 125. You see, 1 tablet, and then you find that, the doctor amekuambia, you're supposed to, like in my case, send 75 mg in the morning, 75 mg in the evening. So when you calculate roughly estimation, you find that in a day, you can consume around 300 to 400 on medication alone. And you calculate that a month, you end up finding out that you're spending more on medication than more you're spending on your rent. So, and not everyone can afford these. Not everyone can afford insurance. So that is more power to Youth on the Move, gathering 1 million signatures, trying to gather 1 million signatures so that to appeal to the government. So, yeah.
And do you get cured of epilepsy?
Nope, that's not the word they use.
Like, does it? I don't know.
Epilepsy is treatable.
Is it treatable?
Yes. You know, when you say cured, it's a guarantee. It's like, niko na malaria. Meza dawa za malaria.
Like, can you ever overcome it?
Yes. That's why it's just that the doctor avoid to say curable, because when they say curable, it's like they have guaranteed you itaisha. No. Though it's likely, a child is likely to overcome it more than an adult, because a child is growing, the brain is growing, with the right medication and everything, they stand a high chance compared to an adult. So for adults, it's Hail Mary. So that's why they say epilepsy is treatable but not curable. So if you're lucky enough, inaweza isha. That's why unaendanga dosage depending na performance yako, dosage inapunguzwa hivyo.
Thank you so much, Ramsey, for having this conversation with me. We are matching today. And if there's a way we can help you collect the signatures, maybe we can tell us and we can pin it on the comment section.
Yes.
We are so, I don't know, mind blown and challenged to constantly now become the better versions of us like you're doing, and kudos to that.
Thank you very much.
So if you need any branding, photography work, Ramsey is your guy. We're going to share the his email address below. If you're living with epilepsy and you don't know how to go about it, we'll share his email address below and he can help you. And thank you, Lawrence, very much. Lawrence Pagaya for this amazing shoot, and Driftwood Spa for these amazing spaces. If you want a massage to relax and detox mentally, Driftwood is the place. So thank you so much. So we cheers. Cheers. Bye.